Some of these hillsides that would have been, just solid brush, we're able to grow grass on them hillsides now. And so like this year, we're in a drought situation. We were able to take our cattle herd and actually graze a lot of those areas off and utilize them acres for the cattle as well. So the goats bring a lot more profitability to the land by utilizing acres that would have not been used before and turning those acres into another profit generator for another enterprise. Mm-hmm. So it's a really beautiful thing what they can do for a farm.
Welcome to the 314th installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's podcast on family farming, regenerative agriculture, community food systems, and local democracy. I'm Brian DeVore, editor of the Land Stewardship Letter. Land, as the old saying goes, is a finite resource, given that they aren't making any more of it these days. That may be so, but in a way, there are ways to create more grazing land on neglected or marginal acres. That's what Jordan and Rochelle Meyer are proving in southeastern Minnesota's Driftless region. The young farmers raise cattle and poultry on pasture and direct market meat, eggs, and raw milk through their Wholesome Family Farms enterprise. Getting access to land is difficult for young farmers these days, given the inflated prices prime ag acres are bringing, particularly in corn and soybean country. But the Meyers are finding that land can be rented for a relatively reasonable price when it's extremely hilly, has poor soil, is overgrown with brush, and otherwise not well suited for raising row crops. But it should be noted that just turning livestock out onto marginal land and expecting a good return on your investment isn't enough. It needs to be restored in a way that it can produce good forage on a consistent basis. Rochelle and Jordan are doing that by utilizing goats to clean up brush, weeds, and invasive species. The animals are also serving an important role by literally transporting biology from the deeply wooded acres they rent onto the open pastured parcels, thus building soil health. That increased soil health, in turn, produces a kind of forage that can pay dividends for a pasture-based business. The Meyers have been raising goats for 3 years, and now have a herd of around 400 animals. They're so happy with the impact the ruminants can have on the land that they're now leasing goats out to other people looking to use them as a way to clean up overgrown acres and generally improve soil and vegetative health. Jordan and Rochelle recently hosted a Land Stewardship Project Soil Health Field Day on one of the farms they rent. Despite the fact that it was a Saturday evening in early August, over 50 people attended, a sign of high interest in goat grazing and pasture improvement. The Meyers led participants on a tour of their hillside grazing paddocks and talked about fencing strategies, animal health, and vegetation management, among other things. Afterwards, Jordan talked to me about the key role goats now play in their farming business. One important lesson the farmers have learned is that these ungulates can make it so just about any plant species is desirable, including noxious weeds. That can be a particularly important advantage during times of severe drought.
For any beginner farmer out there, if you don't have access to land, like you said, there are, at least in our county, in Houston County, Minnesota here, there's acres and acres and acres of ground that are just untouched and just totally getting grown over with buckthorn or multiflora rose and that type of thing. And most people are willing to pay to have people come in with goats and manage those acres. So if there's a beginner farmer out there looking to get into goats or any type of livestock, this would be a really beautiful way for them to get in. We are actually leasing out our goats to other people like that like to go out and do grazing jobs on other people's land, and they actually earn a profit from it. So we're willing to help those farmers out by getting started. They are able to lease our goats from us, and we'll also even provide netting and stuff like that for them also if they don't have any of that available to them.
You went through a little bit kind of the ratio, like how many acres, how many goats it takes to maybe clean up and how much time it takes to clean up an acre of land, that type of thing.
Yeah, so your typical really brushy area that's got a lot of either multiflora rose or buckthorn or a lot of low woody brushy species. Mm-hmm. Typically, like our herd of 400 goats, we would go through about an acre a day. So it kind of breaks down to like 40 goats per acre per week too.
And what kind of infrastructure did you need? It's a different kind of fencing kind of infrastructure than you have, like, say, with your beef or that type of thing, I assume.
Yeah, so we started out with polywire, and we were able to use that along with our beef cattle when we first started. Mm-hmm. But now with all of our other enterprises and family growing and things going on, we wanted to buy ourselves some more time and, maybe only move them goats once a week and have it fit into our schedule a little bit more. The netting, the poly-wire netting, buys us a lot more time that way, and it's more forgiving, and you can sleep at night a lot better knowing that your goats are tucked in where they're supposed to be. So.
Yeah. And what kind of results have you seen? I mean, what can you talk a little bit about some of the, both on this piece that you're on here that you're renting, but also when you've been doing some custom grazing, some of the results that you're seeing, kind of some of the bringing that land back a little bit?
Yeah, so on this farm where we've been running our goats since 2020, we started, it was clear cut, and the woods that was so thick, full, dense of big trees to start with, it opened the canopy up after they logged it, and the brush just started erupting in there, and we took the goats in and started cleaning out areas of that land, and some of these hillsides that would have been, just solid brush, were able to grow grass on them hillsides now. And so like this year, we're in a drought situation. We were able to take our cattle herd and actually graze a lot of those areas off and utilize them acres for the cattle as well. So the goats bring a lot more profitability to the land by utilizing acres that would have not been used before and turning those acres into another profit generator for another enterprise. Mm-hmm. So it's a really beautiful thing what they can do for a farm.
Yeah, I think you had said that woods, before it was cleared out, you actually had to adjust your eye. It was so dark. This is how dense it was. It was a really dense wood.
Yeah, the trees on there were so big and large, and Bart, the landlord here, he ran cattle in there for years too. So there was virtually no undergrowth at all to start with, and when they came in and logged it all off, the sun just hit all the ground, and that's when the brush really started taking off, and that's when we knew that goats would be a really good ticket to have us make more profit on the farm and utilize acres that wouldn't have been.
And you said about 400 goats?
Yep, there's about 400 Spanish goats. And they're registered, and yeah, they're really good, adapted to doing all the browsing and grazing of that nature. We don't feed them grain, and we want the kind of goat that's going to be low maintenance, easy keeping.
That's what I was wondering, if you picked that breed because it is adapted to this kind of situation you have here.
Yep, so the goats that we got, they came from Texas, and they were running around virtually on a 90,000 acre ranch down there. So they were more of the hands-off type of goat, and that's the kind of goat that we need for our situation with how busy we are with all of our 7 kids and all the other enterprises we have going on. So we started out with them other goats, that were from a confinement operation, and we had a humongous amount of culling going on, and it was more nature's calling.
Yeah. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, so we had a lot of them fall out. We have less than 10% of that herd left now, of that regular confinement herd. And this herd that we got from Texas, they're so much more used to going out and making it on their own and using the brush for their nutritional needs. So.
Well, and I know a focus that you guys have always had is soil health, and that's the basis of your operation no matter what enterprise you're doing. And you said that you feel like with the goats and some of the other things that you've been able to do with them and just rotational grazing in general, like this year we are in a drought. I mean, it's going to be up there, one of the driest years we've had in quite some time. But you feel like you actually have more animal units per acre than you have in the past because you've been able to build up that soil health?
Yeah, this year, since we've been managing our cattle and our goats, yeah, we are carrying more animal units per acre this year in the drought year than we have in previous years. And we still have grass ahead of us. We have not fed any hay yet. Although I'm not saying feeding hay is a bad thing, I would actually not mind feeding a little bit myself to slow the cattle down even more. But if looking at the grass ahead of us right now, I would say we have 45 to 50 days of grass ahead of us. If everything just shut off and quit growing, that's what we would have left, and leaving a good enough residual out there. But the animal units per acre is up tremendously this year. We combined our herds of cattle and rotated them back and forth from farm to farm. And then the goats, they bring a whole new thing to the table too as far as fertility goes for your open ground. They're going in the woods to browse during the day, and they're taking all of that brush and leafy material, transferring that biology out to the open pastures and feeding the grasses and everything with their fertility and building new biology that has not been there as much.
I hadn't really thought about that. So if they're in the woods and they're coming back into the pasture, they're bringing fertility that you maybe normally wouldn't have transferred from the woods.
Yeah, that's exactly what you said. That's how it works, and it's a beautiful thing. It's, and goats, they like to work in the woods during the day. They do their browsing and stay out of the sun and everything during the day. During the evening hours, they'll come up and they'll bed in a really tight mob, and when they get up in the morning, they lay down a bunch of manure and urine and fertility that you otherwise would not have had there. So,
And you outwinter your goats, right?
we do. So we'll actually roll out hay for our goats. We buy the big round bales in for feed for them, and yeah, we literally just take them out to the side hill and give them a push down the hill, and the goats will clean that up. And we typically feed them about every other day, maybe every day sometimes when we do it that way. But we've tried it different ways too, doing the bale grazing thing with the goats, but it doesn't work just setting the bales out there, because we've had a few accidents where the goats will eat around the base of the bale and they'll actually tip over on the goats.
I see that when the animals will eat around the bale. I never thought of that. It would probably do a number of them.
yeah, it don't fare too well for goats to do that. So cattle, you can get away with doing that, but goats, we have to roll it out for them. So it works out pretty good anyway, because then we have more of a feeder area, so to speak, for them goats, because when you have a whole trail of goats like that, it takes quite a bit of space for everybody to be able to eat.
Talking about the custom grazing, how economically feasible, how far can you go out? Can you transport? When is it not economically feasible for you to transport them as far as distance? Like, what's your region that you can kind of make it pay to take it to other people's pieces of land?
I think, like the people that are leasing the goats from us right now to run on their own operations, I think they can travel hours for these goats to, make them work. We just recently had a job come up about 3 hours away from us, and they were wondering if we could bring our goats up there to do service to their land, and we told them it's too far for us to be able to manage it on our own, so we're going to reach out to some other grazers in that area and see if they have enough goats to supply that area, or if maybe they want to lease some goats from us to be able to take that job on.
Mm-hmm. And how's that work? If you are going to transport them, or do they come and transport them? And
typically, they've come and got them right off our farm. Okay. So we'll get them all sorted out and then help them load up on their trailer, and then they just take them and manage it on their own. So the operations that have worked with us so far, they have goats of their own, and they're all being busy and working on other projects. So then they'll take a whole different group of goats from us to go to a different site to work. Oh. So if there's somebody out there, though, that doesn't have a trailer and they want to get started in this, that's something that we could help do and get the process going for them. There's a lot of people that would truck goats, and we could too, even for that matter. So,
and then do you provide the fencing and the watering infrastructure? How's that work?
So for somebody that maybe doesn't have any of that to start with, we would definitely look into helping someone out get started that way. That would just all be billed in on the same leasing price with the goats.
And do they do graze differently than cattle or other livestock? Like they browse, and it's a different kind of grazing system it's a different way they're getting their nutrition, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So it's a really beautiful thing too when you can take cattle across an area, and then the stuff that they leave behind, that's almost like the goats' go-to feed to start with. Like that's what they would have preferred to start with anyway. So you get a much more even graze over your property, and you're able to utilize a lot of these extra species that you normally wouldn't have with goats.
You're able to add value to a farm that maybe people have felt like, well, it's getting run down, or it's getting overgrown with invasive species or whatever. But you're able to, by building that soil health with that system, you're able to add value to something that kind of, from the mainstream view of, well, this isn't good corn ground or whatever, it doesn't have that value. But you're able to add value through and get an economic reward for that.
Yeah, I guess honestly, after running goats and cattle and these different species now, I would never call any species of plant undesirable, to be honest with you. We're managing for what we want out there. And if you want more grasses and things like that, goats would definitely be a great thing for you to come in with and start utilizing some of them other unwanted species, so to speak. But every species of plants has a purpose out there. They're all doing something different. The other day we dug up a Queen Anne's lace plant, and most people would consider that just a serious weed and just a problem out there, but it has just a beautiful taproot, and that's also some more goat feed.
You had tried to raise organic row crops here, I think for 5 years or something, and the farm was telling you it wanted to be a grazing farm.
Yeah, most definitely. We started dabbling a little bit with the organic no-till, and because when we did the tillage, we had some serious weed issues. Well, what you would call weeds back then.
Yeah, you don't call them weeds anymore.
No.
That's forage.
Yeah, exactly right. You know, we had tons and tons of giant ragweed and other things like that, and we would spend multiple hours hand pulling them weeds out and this and that. And anytime you'd see a ragweed, you're like, oh my goodness, it's just a nightmare. And then after dabbling with the organic no-till, we had less weeds, but then the perennial grasses started coming in. So going through the stages of succession, you know, when you start from bare ground, you hit up the weeds. That's like the first stage, and then you'll start slowly getting into the, you know, a little bit of broad leaves like the clovers and stuff like that. And then after you go out of the clovers, then it goes to more grass. And it was telling us something. It was following the stages of succession. And when I seen the red clover and the chicory and the orchard grass and timothy and all of them different species of plants coming up in my organic no-till system, I just knew, I'm just going to start grazing this because this is a beautiful thing and it's already here. I don't have to pay for it, and away we go.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Those goats, in a way, kind of triggered that success. It was a succession that would have occurred anyway if you just let it go, but you're able to kind of maybe channel it in a different direction a little bit.
Yeah, so a lot of them, you know, undesirable forbs that are out there, you know, we were able to utilize them with the goats. But also the cows do eat those plants too under good management, doing more moves with the cattle, higher stock densities and things like that. You know, we have a lot of different species of plants coming up in our fields that used to be fields, now they're grasslands, but we had wild parsnip and different things like that, you know, like, oh man, cattle would never eat that, but they love that. They get that before the goats do. So, yeah, but there's still plenty of species out there that the goats would definitely take advantage of, like the plumeless thistle that we were seeing out in the pasture here. A lot of people call it musk thistle, but we've found out it's plumeless. But yeah, they eat the bulbs off of them and take some of these undesirable plants and turn them into cash.
Yeah, no, we saw it firsthand. We saw them working on those thistle out there. It was great. Do you sell some of them as meat then, or how? What's that part of it?
We haven't marketed the goats for meat a whole lot, but we have had few people reach out and in the cities and stuff like that where we've taken goats in and butchered them and sell them direct like that. But most of it is selling as breeding stock, and then a little bit to the sales barn and stuff like that.
What are some, I guess, less hard lessons that you've learned in getting into the goat? I don't know how many years you've been raising goats.
3 years now.
3 years, yeah. So what's in the last 3 years? What are some lessons? There's always going to be some hard lessons that you've learned.
I guess when you're going to first start out getting goats, try to find goats that are more raised in the same way that you want to raise your goats. So we bought the conventional herd to start with, and they were grain fed and things like that, you know, and we thought we could take them to our system and, you know, let them go out and browse and everything like that, and we ended up with a lot of parasite issues and hoof issues and stuff like that, and we have less than 10% of our herd left out of those ones that we started with. And then since we started with the Spanish, things are going much, much better for us. That was the hardest lesson. And then I guess another really hard lesson is the predator issue. You know, we didn't have guard dogs for the first year, and we did just fine, and, you know, we didn't even think nothing of it. And, you know, we're moving our goats enough, it must be enough, you know, to keep the predators away, because we're always moving and doing things different, changing it up. But then within a 1 week span in the next year, we lost at least 40 kids to predators and some adult mature does.
Yeah, you said it was coyotes and bobcats. Wow.
Yep, and then after that we started dabbling with the livestock guardian dog part of it, and we had a lot of hard lessons with that one too. But we ended up getting a pup that we raised up with our bucks and a few bottle baby kids, and, you know, had them in close proximity of each other, and they bonded with each other really well. And then we were able to blend them in with our herd during breeding season, and then we have 4 really good dogs now. So the one dog that we started with, she had pups, and we raised them up, and they were raised with them, and yeah, it's all working out really well. And now we actually have her whole litter of 11 of them that she had. So
I guess any advice to somebody who's just wants to start looking into goats? I mean, just a couple things to get people started, or some things they should keep in mind?
I guess look at what options you have available as far as ground goes. Like if you wanted to run them on your own property or rented property, or if you wanted to start your own goat grazing business, you can go start asking people in your neighborhood. You see a bunch of woods laying around that's just got a ton of brush laying in it. It's like, man, that's a bunch of really great goat feed there. I bet you we could really utilize that. Go talk to some people in the neighborhood. Maybe they would be interested in you coming in with some goats to clean that up. And then just talk to other local people that are doing it and start learning, coming to field days like this one, and you'll learn a lot on things that you need to know for moving forward.
Well, that's what was great about this field day. I overheard a lot of people who said, and talked to people who said, yeah, I think I'm going to start getting a few goats. So the more people you get, the more information is out there to see, because they're all going to have a different experience. So that's what's great about it. Events like this is you create that network.
Definitely. Yep. So yeah, like you said, the more people you have doing it, the more experience is out there, and every farmer is different than the next one. Everybody has a different way of doing it, it seems like, and not every way is wrong and not every way is right. Whatever works for you is kind of the way you need to go.
For more information on building soil health profitably utilizing grazing, see the podcast page for Ear to the Ground episode 314 at landstewardshipproject.org. Also on our podcast page, there's a link to LSP's list of pasture walk events, as well as information on other podcasts featuring wholesome family farms. We've included a link to the farm's YouTube page, which has videos on managing goats. If you have comments or suggestions about this podcast, contact Brian DeVore at bdevore at landstewardshipproject.org, or you can call 612-816-9342. By the way, it helps us greatly if you can give Ear to the Ground a rating on whatever podcast platform you utilize. Thanks to Laura Borgendale, a Western Minnesota musician, for Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member, visit landstewardshipproject.org to learn how you can support LSP. Thanks for listening.